New filing, we turn to Joshua Ritter, former prosecutor, criminal defense attorney, and host of the Courtroom Confidential podcast. Joshua, it's always great to see you. We'll dive right in and ask sort of the million-dollar question right off the bat. Based on your experience, how likely is it, do you think, that the defense will succeed and get this trial moved?
Normally, I'd say that they have a very slim chance of convincing a judge to move a trial of this magnitude. Usually there's a presumption that it will remain in the jurisdiction where the crime took place. What makes this a little different is that polling doesn't just reveal a bias that people in that community may hold toward Kohberger, but it's talking about violence, and that should be a concern. I mean, they're using statements like they burned the courthouse down, that they would take justice into their own hands and kill him himself if he were to be acquitted. So this is something that obviously is going to give the judge pause, but he's got to weigh that against a couple of things. First of all, this is a death penalty case. Everything is going to be under scrutiny. And secondly, by moving it, he's also going to inconvenience the witnesses and families of the victims that they would have to travel that far to attend the trial. So a lot going on. I still think it's an uphill battle for the defense, but certainly made much more strong with these comments taken from the local community.
And prosecutors have called, to your point, the defense's claims a, quote, extreme exaggeration. What do you think is the strongest argument prosecutors could make to keep this trial where it's set to be?
I think they're going to say that, listen, you can poll a community and, of course, cherry pick a few outliers who are there who have very strong feelings about this. But the point is, will we be able to find a fair and impartial jury? And we're really not going to get an answer to that question until we start the selection process. And I think they're going to argue that, listen, many people may have strong feelings about this, but you're also going to find that many people in the community don't, and that many people in the community have not been following this case as closely. And again, going back to that idea that this is where the crime took place, and this is where the victims are, and the victims' families, and all of the witnesses who would be involved.
In this story, it's made national headlines for 2 years now. What are the odds, from your perspective, of finding truly impartial jurors in such a high-profile case?
It's going to be difficult. I don't know if I would go to the point of saying impossible in that community, but you've got a couple of things. Is one, it's in a smaller community, and two, it's a college community. So things usually that affects the college in the way that this dramatically did are of course going to be news, or of course going to be something that people are talking about at the local coffee shop. So it's going to be very difficult, I think, to find people who don't know about the case. The problem is, are they going to be able to find people who have not prejudged the facts and already determined that the defendant is guilty in this case to the extent that they can't even sit for trial? That, I think, is the prosecutor's strongest argument to say, let's give it a chance here first.
Yeah, that makes sense. We have about 40 seconds left, but I want to squeeze this in. How will the high-profile nature of this case play into the defense's strategy during the trial? Do you think it'll have a big impact?
I think it's obviously going to have an impact on the case. I think it's hard to argue that when you have a case of this magnitude, it's nationwide attention, so focused on a very small community. There are likely going to be cameras in the courtroom every day. People are just going to change the way that they behave. And the defense is saying, this is a case where you want to put our client to death. That falls under a special amount of scrutiny, and we have to take careful steps in everything that we do. And I think they're going to constantly put pressure on the judge using that argument.
All right, Joshua Ritter, we always look forward to you weighing in. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me.